Well, do you remember a while back when I was talking about how Benjamin Netanyahu, about a week before the October 7th attacks, was standing before the UN holding up a map? And this was the map. And look at all the area that is green. Well, now we know that there's been this vision of a greater expanded Israel, and the whole green area was showing the expansion of greater Israel. And this has been something that's been a vision of Theodore Herzl from 1904. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this because I truly believe that the corridor that he was pointing to, that they were going to create into the Mediterranean Sea through the port of Gaza, was the whole game plan from the beginning. And that when Joe Biden was in, he put kind of a temporary port there. And then it was going to be turned into a huge port where they have all of this expansion idea of the pipelines, gas pipelines, oil pipelines, the fiber optic cable running underneath the Mediterranean Sea. And it runs all the way from India through, countries like Yemen, Jordan, and it comes up through Israel, through that port in Gaza, and right into the Mediterranean Sea, and it goes all the way up into Italy and Cyprus and I think up into France even, so Europe. So this would be how, in the last days, Mystery Babylon, the great mother of harlots, gains her wealth by trade on the Mediterranean Sea. And this is when the ships and shipmasters that trade with her stand afar off, lamenting for the smoke rising up at her judgment. I truly believe it's the Mediterranean Sea that the wealth is going to come to expanded greater Israel, and Mystery Babylon, the great mother of harlots there. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on some of the facts about this situation. Netanyahu's greater Israel vision. In an interview with Israel's I-24 news channel, Netanyahu declared that he is on a historic and spiritual mission to emotionally connect to the vision of the greater Israel, a vision based on an expansion. He said, "I'm on a mission of generations. It is rooted in Zionist ideas and biblical doctrines, claiming that the promised land extends from the Nile in Egypt to the Euphrates in Syria and Iraq, which is where Babylon of ancient days was. It includes vast areas of Arabia, including Medina in Saudi Arabia, along with all of historic Palestine, all of Lebanon, all of Jordan, more than 70% of Syria, 1/2 of Iraq, about 1/3 of Saudi territory, and 1/4 of Egypt." So this expansion is great. And I truly believe that part of the reason why no one has been able to truly decipher in great detail about Mystery Babylon up until now is because it just isn't developed enough for people to see the depth of what they're trying to do and accomplish there with the greater expansion of Israel. Israel's Torah and Land Institute website asserts that greater Israel extends from the Euphrates to the Nile, a phrase attributed to the Zionist movement founder Theodore Herzl, who announced his expansion project in 1904. I'm going to put on my regular readers. These are readers, but it's a little too dark with it being a rainy day. And I can't read my notes that I took here. But Netanyahu and his far-right coalition now view recent regional developments as a historic opportunity to turn that biblical concept into an actionable political program, especially in Syria, where conditions are being prepared for the creation of the so-called David Corridor, framed as humanitarian, to connect Israel with the stricken Sweda Governorate via Quneitra and Daria, reaching the Euphrates and Kurdish connect across to eastern Syria. Now, this David's Corridor project is aimed at controlling water and wheat resources, fragmenting Syria, and weakening the axis of resistance, and poses a series of threats to West Asia's security. Now, what's really interesting about this is the very group of people that are listed in Ezekiel 38 are mentioned here. It says Iran, Turkey, and Russia oppose this David's Corridor project. The project actually disrupts regional trade routes and access to water and agricultural resources, leading to economic instability for Iran, which seeks expanded economic cooperation with Iraq and Syria. Disruptions to these trade routes, like the Syria-Mediterranean corridor, could harm its economy. And control of strategic water and wheat resources in West Asia is its goal. Water and agriculture are central to David's Corridor. Israel plans pipelines, listen to this, from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers to secure water for its controlled areas and allies, limiting Syria and Jordan access through regions like Yarmouk Basin in Huron Plain. Controlling wheat-producing areas in Deir Itzor and Raqqa threatens Syria's food security and increases dependence on external resources and risking economic humanitarian crises. Now let me just show you a couple of the maps of this expansion and how much greater Israel's territory would be expanded, and how this all plays a role in the trade and gaining wealth. And then, of course, there's the Middle East. There's the India-Middle East trade corridor going through the Gaza port. That's why Israel had to get involved in this situation to eventually take over Gaza. That's why Donald Trump said he would turn it into the Riviera, and it would become a major trading hub and a place for Israel to gain gigantic wealth in the last days, and to gain a lot of control, and eventually to have their Supreme Court be the one world judicial system, with the one world government, with the king when the Sanhedrin gains power again, and to put a king on the throne of David that is not King Yeshua, which is the Antichrist. And so that's how it's all going to go down. That's how they're going to gain wealth, is through all of this trade and this David's Corridor, and the port in Gaza that is going to be expanded greatly. And this is just a development further, something they've been planning since the beginning of the nation state of Israel, and even before that in 1904 with Theodore Herzl. These expansions are really astonishing, because in my last videos I was talking about how Jerusalem is the place of the former Garden of Eden. I was talking about the Gihon Spring being there, and I was explaining in, I think it was Psalm 139, I was talking about where when the people went to Babylon, they hung up their harps on the willows, and I was explaining that they were like the willows that were thirst. The roots go down and they seek out water. They had been moved out from where the Garden of Eden had been, where God's divine presence had been, And then they were moved next to a river that had flown out of Jerusalem, the place of the Garden of Eden. But they hung up their harps there, because if they ever forgot Jerusalem, the place of the Garden of Eden, let their tongue cleave to the roof of their mouth, because they thirsted for God, and his presence was not there with them when they were taken away captive to Babylon. So they hung their harps up there. They could not sing David's psalms in a foreign land. But now this expansion shows you how they're going to gain great wealth in the last days, become Mystery Babylon, the great mother of harlots, and bring all the things that had to do with the false worship of Babylon that's corrupted there to God's mountain, to be a house of prayer for all nations with all religions, and a one world religion. And ultimately they want to have their king be the world ruler. And this really shows you how they plan this huge expansion into these areas to take over the land and the resources and everything. So this is partly what's been causing a lot of the conflict. And I truly believe when Benjamin Netanyahu held up that map saying the new Middle East, and it was showing the green area that was all of the expanded greater Israel, that is what set people off to attack Israel on October 7th. I don't really think it had much to do with the red heifer like people stated. I truly believe it had to do with this map that he held up showing that he was going to take all these territories, just like they took Gaza and plan to control it so they can gain wealth through the seaport there that they plan to put with the fiber optic cables, the gas pipelines, and the oil pipeline, and everything that will make Israel super wealthy in the last days. And then the Lord's going to come down and take the throne from the king that they put on the throne. And great judgment is going to come, because most of the nation state of Israel are not believers in God like we would think that they would be. And Christians have been kind of duped to believe that it's all good there and it's all going to be good. So I'm trying to warn people that this is their plan, and this is going to cause a lot of regional conflicts, believe me. And interesting that they would try to get this territory where ancient Babylon is in Iraq, and expanding it through all the rivers and use of the water of the rivers. You know, the Nile River was the one thing that caused the agricultural greenness to be around the Levant and the what they call the Fertile Crescent. And this is the river that Pharaoh said, "The river is mine, I have made it for myself," because he thought he was a god. So it's interesting that they would incorporate all the rivers that had to do with Eden in the last days. So it's all going to come back to Jerusalem. The Tigris, the Euphrates, the Gihon, and the Nile was probably the other river. So this is really fascinating. So I just wanted to let you know how this has been developing into the trade routes that Israel will control, that will make her wealthy, to be Mystery Babylon, the great mother of harlots in the last days, where she sits and says, "I sit a queen and am no widow. I shall see no mourning," because she thinks God is with her. But the Bible does say that if they follow my commandments and they follow me, or they believe in me, then this blessing will come to them. But if half of them are in disbelief of God even, that blessing is not going to come. Rather, it's going to be the curse. So that's just the truth of it. Anyway, I'm trying to get you to see the truth of this, because the church has been brainwashed deliberately. And anyway, so that's all I had for now. Talk to you later on. Have a good evening. Good night.